We have a game where Caleb Williams, just like we said when we drafted him, hey, this kid's going to set rookie Bears quarterback records. Now, are those records, is that bar very high? No, it's not, but that's why we were pretty confident that he was going to set it. And a game where he wound up having, I got it here, 373 yards, 2 touchdowns, 68.1 completion percentage, and 103.1 quarterback rating. Caleb goes ahead and breaks the yardage record for Bears rookie quarterback. He also ties the throwing touchdown record at 11 touchdowns. The yardage is, I believe he's at 2,300 something now, surpassing Mitch Trubisky for that one. But, another comeback type game for Caleb Williams, but you can't really call it a comeback unless you finish the comeback. And that's, unfortunately, that's kind of been the MO of these Eberflus teams. A lot of blown games at the very end, over and over and over and over. And so it was great to see, like I said, this season's all about an eye test for me. It was great to see that effort and that clutch performance from Caleb. I'm just going to add it in there. I think where the rookie downfall comes in, when we say, you got to live with the rookie slumps and this and that, is right in overtime, you get the ball, second down, you get sacked, making that a very, very, very tough 3rd and 21. And then you follow it up by what? A false start, 3rd and 26, and now you're pretty much dead in the water in overtime. But, I mean, other than that, the end of the game looked really impressive for Caleb, and he did exactly what he needed to do to put the team in a position to at least tie it and go into overtime. So,
yeah, well, I think I'm with Dave that I'm kind of like settling into where we're at and what expectations should be. And I actually saw a competitive team the last 2 weeks, which we didn't see against New England. We didn't see against Arizona, right? So I think there's a lot of positives to take from it, pretty much all on Caleb Williams' shoulders and by extension, Thomas Brown. I don't want to take all the meat off the bone. Dave, what do you think so far about Thomas Brown and Caleb Williams and where we're at with this Bears season?
I think we do need to kind of start taking meat off the bone, because at this point, J2K, like, you're finding the slivers of hope. And like you said, it's all about Caleb right now, which is unfortunate, because this reminds me of conversations me and Paulie had 2 years ago, where we were talking the same stuff about Justin Fields, where we're okay with losing. And trust me, I'm a guy who's okay with losing, if it's for the right reasons and if it makes sense for the team. The Bears have sucked me back in every single week lately. And whether that's just Caleb or just being competitive or me just being sick of the rebuild, I wanted that win. I was watching it and I was thirsty for it. And there was no part of me that was like, looking for Eberflus will more likely get fired and blah, 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 and a better draft pick. Like, that wasn't my thinking at all anymore. And I'm past that. But this does bring me back to 2 years ago, where we said, if Justin Fields throws for 300 yards a game, but you still find a way to lose, that's a good thing. I think we're past that. I think we shouldn't be there anymore, because this team, and every week that we kind of go on, is just more and more obviously talented, and the coaching is just holding them back so much. And the just game management and the situational awareness and the basic fundamentals of football. This is a team that, it's if you've ever played basketball with like any kids nowadays, they all walk up and they just start chucking up threes because they saw Steph Curry do it, but none of them can make a layup. And that's what this team is in my mind. They're all just chucking up threes. We can hit the deep bombs. We can hit the big plays. We can maybe get a pick or two here, but we can't make layups. And Paulie loves using that analogy, and he's not a big basketball guy, but we just can't make layups on this team. And I'm coming to terms with it, but right now it's all about Caleb, and the silver lining is that we are seeing him be an absolute superstar. It's a funny thing as a Bears fan, if you break down the team segment by segment, and the thing that we're the most confident and comfortable with is the quarterback, and everything else is the problem. It's just my point.
The rookie quarterback too.
Yeah.
And that's what we're most confident about, is the rookie. Yeah. It's tough times, man. I hear you, man. And I am trying to find slivers of hope in this, because, we still have quite a season, left to see what happens. And I think we're all watching a lame duck head coach, right? So where do you go other than try to find the slivers of hope and what is the next head coach got on his plate? I think there's some optimism there, but Paul, what do you think?
Well, you look at this division, J2K, and the three teams other than us, the Lions, the Vikings, the Packers, they're 27-6 combined. So, I mean, we're looking at an average of a 9-2 record per team. Like if you had to just split it up evenly, right? So we're the ones dragging this division down at the moment, currently record-wise. And as far as slivers of hope, when your division is that tough, I mean, you might have a better chance of going out and playing the lotto, to be honest with you, than to think that the Bears are going to do anything substantial this year. I go back to this game, and once again, there's just simple things that kind of, like I said, I'm very impressed with the performance of what he was asked to do and how he performed. However, overall, we ran the ball 16 times. Outside of Caleb Williams' rushes, we only handed the ball to running back 16 times. Against the defense, that's a top pass rush defense. They're known for their crazy exotic blitzes. And we asked the rookie quarterback.
To interrupt you, I believe Caleb led the game in rushing, right?
Oh, I'm not sure. Did he?
I'm 99% sure he led the game in rushing.
Well, so we asked him to throw the ball 47 times. Now, mind you, like I said, 68% completion percentage. I believe he was 32 for 47, something like that. But, we put a lot on his plate still. And so, like, I just wish that there was an easier game plan to be able to devise to make this thing a little bit more of a smooth road for Caleb rather than his constant uphill battle.
Well, I actually liked the game plan. I know it was heavy and run, but a lot of what we had to do against that cover 1, cover 0 blitz scheme Flores runs is we ran a lot of screen plays. And those kind of subtracted run plays out of it. We're going lateral. We're not relying on the offensive line as much because that is a very poor position group for us. So I actually liked the game plan. I also saw some differences from last week to this week. Last week we're in a lot of these bunch formations, and this week spread the receivers out wider so that Minnesota couldn't dial up as many exotic blitzes on us. So I'm a huge fan of what Thomas Brown has done in 2 games. I've seen a shift in scheme given the 2 defenses he faced, and given what we can work with on offense. I also think that we had to come from behind quite a bit in that game, and a lot of those false start penalties, just the overall penalties on offense kept pushing us back. Longer yardage situations, which means more likelihood for passing. So I am okay with it, but I think in general, you go 16 rushing attempts in a game, most likely you're not winning that game, right?
Yeah, just to confirm, Caleb Williams had 6 carries for 33 yards, led the team in carries rushing yards that day. Swift had 13 for 30. DJ Moore had 1 screen, reverse for 1 for 13, and then Roshan 2 for 2. I'm with you, J2K. Great points on that part where you do see a usually complex Minnesota like defense with a lot of schematic stuff I watched Paul with Carl the other day, and they were talking about like the crazy schemes that Brian Flores pulls up, and it's just linebackers over the center and safeties over the center and stuff. And it did look like a much more pedestrian defense against the Bears, which is super promising, all things considered, for Thomas Brown and Caleb. But Caleb is he's different, man. I mean, we should talk about some positives in terms of Thomas Brown and Caleb Williams. And that's one of those connections that in the back of my mind, I don't want to split up, and I don't want to kind of separate at this point. But moving forward and looking forward as the season goes on, the only thing that Thomas Brown can do for you right now, as his position as offensive coordinator, is just keep developing Caleb's confidence, because system-wise, we have no idea what's coming next year. But what I've seen so far is just Caleb playing free. He's looking like Caleb from USC. And those things are the positives for sure.
Yeah, that pass to Swift. Caleb rolls out and he's on the move and he chucks the ball up. That was, I don't know if you remember the highlight from USC, but it was like almost identical. Just the arm talent, off platform throws. Yeah.
Yeah, and even more so than the off-platform throws. And if we're talking about just Caleb straight up as a development player type of situation, the guys led 3 fourth-quarter comebacks as a rookie, which every time a game tying or a game-winning situation pops up within 5 minutes, I immediately text Paul because I know all he's doing is just thinking like, well, this is what matters, man. 3 minutes and less and what your quarterback can do. And I know he's just salivating and just chomping at the bit to see what he can do. And so far, he's 3 for 3 in those opportunities. I think maybe 3 for 4 if we're talking about like Houston as well back in the early part of the season. But the other part of it is that I think we've seen what we need to see in terms of confidence, where he is doing all the things that high-level NFL quarterbacks struggle to do. And that's like those tight windows throws, anticipatory throws, rifling in between 2 defenders' hands. And some people call that luck and just nobody could tip that ball. But the good guys do it consistently. And then, it doesn't look like luck anymore. It just looks like what you're skilled at. And that's, again, we're trying to find silver linings before we get into the negatives. And that's the stuff that I look at with just those tight window throws between 2 defenders. Fingertips can't just get on it. And he's executing those things, which no matter who's the offensive coordinator, whoever's the coach next year, those things translate. Those are not things that you need to worry about being a system guy. Those are things that you need as a baller in game time, and it's irrelevant of what the system is. That's just things that you can't teach. You can't coach that. Those are the things that I'm optimistic about watching these last few games if you have to find some silver linings.
And David, I think you mentioned this in like week 2 or week 3, where you're like, man, he had a pass that just went right over a linebacker's fingertips. And you're like, it doesn't matter who the linebacker is. Like, you're like, over the fingertips is over the fingertips. Like, you're going to be able to do that again. And I think we saw that again this game, towards the end of the game, where he just threw it right over the linebacker's hand and got it to Keenan Allen and, in a clutch moment as well. Caleb's on pace for a 3,600-yard season if you just take his season average and spread it out. However, if you take the average over the last 2 games with Thomas Brown, he's actually on pace to break 4,000 if he continues this. But I mean, we've only had a 2-game sample size, so it's small number of games to go off of to sit there and make predictions like that. However, there has definitely been an increase in Caleb Williams' production under Thomas Brown. You can't deny that. To me personally, I tend to feel that just kind of it's beneficial from how bad Shane Waldron really was. Like, he set the bar really low. It's, you know what I mean? So for a guy to be able to come in and do better than that, it's nice, but it's also, in my opinion, expected. So good for Thomas Brown. He's doing what he's supposed to do, and he's calling a good game plan. Do I think we need to tie him to Caleb Williams in the future moving forward? Not necessarily. Listen, if you get another coach in here and he wants to keep Thomas Brown around, sure, I'm all game. But it's got to be that coach's decision. I'm not going to sit here and go, we got to keep this guy because we had some kind of little spark there for a little bit. To me, I just feel like there's other coaches in this league that could definitely still coach and get good production and call a good game plan for this kid and help him grow. And, there's guys out there with experience that Matt Eberflus, man, he is winning percentage wise, the 3rd worst coach in Bears history, right? Like, he's got, I don't know how many blown 4th quarter games now. I heard the statistics earlier today. I was going to write them down, but it doesn't matter. I mean, we've all lived through it and experienced it. We know it's dozens. So there's been so many bad 4th quarter moments with this guy. And then on top of it, I just learned this one. He is 20% on his challenges. And I could go back to a clip from earlier this year where he's like, oh, challenges? No, we're good on that. And I have this clip somewhere. I really wish I would have had it ready for the show, but it's like, you're not good at your challenges. In fact, you're historically one of the worst Bears head coaches at challenges.
You're talking to grown men who are accountable and get called out. And the last thing you want to do is piss them off with no accountability on yourself. And this goes back to Justin Fields. The guy accidentally slipped up. and made his head and his offensive coordinator accountable, and he had to retract that statement.
2 really bad challenges, not according to Eberflus. He said, since I've gotten here, we've been really good at that. You're 2 for 7. You're 0-2 last night.
How do you clean that up to make sure that those challenges go in the right direction for you?
Yeah, I mean, we've been pretty clean overall, since we've been here.
No, you're not really good at challenges, and those are 2 obvious challenges. Now, the second one, I understand a little bit more due to the fact that the situation could have turned that game around, but at the same time, it's your second challenge then. You can't sit there and just waste it.
Did you hear his comment on the challenge for the Jordan Addison play?
Yes, because it was just a long play.
Yeah, it was an explosive. So we need to challenge it because it's an explosive.
Right. Whereas like situational plays that I believe there was one against Washington where it's like, I don't care. You still like throw the flag in that moment just because it's that moment. You know what I mean? And those are the moments he doesn't do. But no, if a guy carves up a big chunk of yardage on you, it could be totally clean and he's going to challenge that. It kind of makes no sense. I also
I push back on that a little bit just because I know that sometimes these challenges, they're used as timeouts, right? So you get a big explosive play. You don't have the time to upstairs to watch back the replay, all this kind of stuff. You throw the flag, settle your guys in. If there's, a little bit of luck, you might get a replay that shows, the ball was dropped or something like that. But sometimes these coaches are calling these challenges as timeouts. I think that's what Flus was basically saying. I think he kind of said it in the goofy way.
He says everything
Part of that
in a goofy way.
Yeah,
real quick,
is the problem.
Real quick though, I would totally understand, and I'd be with you, J2K, if it wasn't for the fact that over a span of 3 years now, he's 20% on his challenges, right? So when
1 out of 5 gets
when you keep
successful.
repeating it, that's when it becomes a little bit more like I'm going to be way more critical about it because now you're repeating this mistake over and over and over. Another thing I don't understand, and at the time I texted David and I go, listen, it could just be a difference in philosophy because I've seen some coaches kind of, I guess, take this approach. I don't understand the 2-point conversion. Like, I guess, are you trying to really ride your momentum high and put yourself in a position where if you score the next touchdown, you will win with a kick or whatnot? But, like, I just felt, to me, at that moment in time, just kick the extra point, focus on getting another touchdown, taking this thing into overtime. Like, it was kind of odd to me, and I wanted to get you guys' thoughts about, the challenges and the 2-point conversion call.
The sequence was odd because I'm from the belief that you take the points that are in front of you, and until you need to get that 2-point conversion, do you attempt the 2-point conversion? There was no point in attempting it. Now, maybe behind the scenes, Caleb's in Flus's ear, like, I'm on fire. I'm reading this defense. If there's a time to get these 2 points, it's now. You got to trust me, coach. Or Flus has that kind of mindset that we've got momentum, we've driven down the field, let's keep this momentum going. Then, okay, I might give you a pass, but I think we go back to where you start looking at the record. Have you been successful doing this? Like going off script, have you been successful doing it? And it's no. It's, take the 1 point, you're down by 7, you can even tie it with, without going for a 2-point conversion. If you want to be a daredevil and attempt the win at the end of the game on a 2-pointer, then fine. That's a different conversation.
Right. That I understand a lot more.
Right.
So I think what the nuance of it is I think Eberflus is a dope. I mean, to say that like in terms of like the kindness of it, but I know what he's trying to do, which is the analytical, statistical, sabermetric new influence on football, which is that 2-point conversions get converted 55% of the time. If you have 2 of them to win the game and it's 28-28, well, if you get 1 of them, it's still 28-28. But if you make 1 of them, then you make the next one, it's 28-29, yada, yada, yada. That is like, he's a year behind on that because that is popular-ish in terms of the sabermetrics of football now. But part of that, and I think it's just more of this trio's line of thinking is, there's the sabermetrics and the numbers of football, and then there's the feeling and what's going on in the game. And I agree with both you guys in the sense of in that moment, you got to just take the points and try to even compete to get a tie game, because that's the only thing that's been kind of, I mean, regardless of how we look at it, guys, this was a 30 to 27 game, right? Like 27. Like, this was an absurd amount of scoring for the Bears. Where did they fail? In defense. Guys, this is Minnesota. Yes, they're a good offense in terms of Justin Jefferson and whatever, but Sam Darnold should not be scoring 27 points on a top 3 defense. It just shouldn't happen. So I get where he's going with it. I just think it was poorly executed, and it makes him look even dumber. If he got it right, it would have made him look smart, but very rarely does Eberflus do these trendy things that make him try to look smart, and it actually works out. And this is part of the whole him coaching scared, the cover 2, the soft shell. And somebody asked this question on a podcast I was listening to, and I legitimately questioned the answer. Did Eberflus coach against the Minnesota Vikings in overtime, thinking if they scored a field goal, he gets a chance to come back? Because I don't like they were preventing it.
Yeah, it did seem like they were more in a defense to stop like a touchdown.
I genuinely, it's more anecdotal. It's a joke. It's kind of it is, but
the referee literally came out and said the next team to score any points wins the game. I mean, I heard that.
I wouldn't put anything past him at this point. I think his game awareness is so bad that I wouldn't be surprised if he was coaching thinking, well, if we didn't score a touchdown and they score a field goal, we get a chance to score a touchdown. And I think I wouldn't be shocked if that's what his thought process was.
And I mean, that's at this point you're just speculating, but when it comes to the things that actually happened, like you go back to the Washington game and he had to take a timeout to figure out whether he should go for 2 or not. On a play, he had to go for 2. Like, it was just obvious to everybody, and you shouldn't have to figure that out. You should be 3 steps ahead mentally, predicting what you need to do. And now we get to this game and you're going to play Mr. Analytics.
Part of that, part of my point to support, which I forgot to mention, was the conversation about the 4th and 3, where the field goal unit was coming out, and then Caleb and DJ Moore waved them off and said, we need to go for this. And DJ Moore today during his press conference was like, I don't know what that was, and I don't know why the field goal unit was coming out, and we needed to stay out there, and we knew we needed to, but for some reason the field goal unit was coming out. And that's what I mean in terms of like the game awareness. Like, the guy has no game awareness, where even the player, DJ Moore, is like clearly just so fucking fed up with Matt Eberflus's bullshit that he's even in the post game saying, like, I don't know what that was. That was an awkward exchange where the special teams is coming out, but it shouldn't have been because we were out there and we needed to keep going. But that's kind of part of my point, which is I don't know if Matt Eberflus knows.
And that's actually a disconnect between him and Hightower, because both of those are actually technically on Hightower. Now, Flus should have those things ironed out. I think that's the overall point. On the first one, Flus did say we're going for 2. Hightower put up the 1. Special teams guys are watching the special teams coach. What finger does he put up? The guys, on offense are looking at Flus going, what fingers is he putting up? So there's a disconnect there. Flus was correct in both of those, but Hightower was wrong. But it just goes back to, okay, why is there a disconnect between, the two of them right now? What's going on?
And J2K, I brought this up in the past, like, in my mind, in my opinion, right? If you're taking the job as a head coach of any NFL football team, right? At this point, you've been in football your whole life. You've probably played. You've been an assistant coach. You've been, you've had a whole career leading up to this moment where you get this ultimate opportunity. And you've been in a ton of situations. Situational football should be something that you completely understand and have a grasp of. And in my mind, I want a guy that comes in here and has a concrete philosophy from the top down. And so I mentioned this before, like, if I come up to you in practice and you're my offensive coordinator and I rattle off a situation to you, you better bark out a play at me that's something to what I have in my mind, right? Something similar to what I have in my mind. And then if I go to my quarterback and I give him that same situation, he better bark out a play at me that's similar to something that I have in my mind. This should be a systemic thing from the top down, but everybody should be on the same page somehow. Instead, what I feel like we have with Flus is like, hey, I'm in charge of this. You're in charge of that, and I trust you. And it seems like there's no checks and balances, so to speak, which is why there is this disconnect when it comes to the offense. You know what I mean? The offense changed dramatically from Luke Getsy to Shane Waldron. It did.
Paulie, I think part of what you're talking about, though, is not that there's no like hierarchical checks and balances thing. Is I don't think he knows any better. We're not talking about a delegator. We're talking about a guy who can handle his category, and that's it. And I think that's part of the problem is that there's no leadership to Hightower. There's no leadership to Shane Waldron. There's no leadership kind of being trickled down of, like we said, even when we heard, we used this example back during the fullback dive or the speed option, where Flus is hearing that play be called. And he has the ultimate veto right to go, what the fuck are you doing? Timeout. Do not call that shit. That is insane. And I forget who mentioned it to us, but I think it was maybe Carl talking about Mike Tomlin, where Mike Tomlin will hop on the headset and just tell his offensive coordinator, best short yardage run right now. And it's Arthur Smith's job to call the best short yardage run that he can come up with, because that's the head coach's game awareness. That is what they need to be, a game manager. And I think the disconnect and the lack of leadership of just Matt Eberflus, like not having any clue. He can process one thing at a time. An NFL head coach needs to process 5, 6, 7 things at a time while also being a step or two ahead. And he has none of that skill.
Yeah. And, I think you kind of see it in the press conferences where they ask him questions. He goes, well, I need to look at that. Well, we need to review the tape on that. Well, I got to go back and see that. what are you watching during the game then, man?
We know that 5 minutes after watching the game.
Right. And I get you're in the moment, but so are these other coaches. They seem to do just fine being able to answer questions about situations right after the game. So, yeah, I don't know. J2K, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, something I kind of see or looking back on it is Flus is, he's a soft coach, and he went out and hired Shane Waldron, who now I know he's a soft coach, right? Thomas Brown, he's more of a leader and a vocal challenger kind of a guy, someone you'd run through a wall for. But so I think there was an issue where they kind of, Flus is the player's coach, and bringing in Waldron, he's a bit soft. You've got a high draft pick in a rookie quarterback, number 1 overall, who's kind of taking the reins or the leadership, and suddenly, it's this rookie quarterback who's kind of leading the room when it should be a head coach being that much bigger than he is.
100%.
I think part of that problem comes back, J2K, to literally week 1 of the season or week 2, where the players are begging for it. Please coach us harder.
Right.
It came out. That news is not something that comes out lightly out of NFL locker rooms. So for you to say it publicly is to the point where it's gone past the point of this has been, like we've all been with coworkers or, people who we're working with that, hey, hint, 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 this is what I need. And it got past that to the point where they needed to say it publicly so that Shane Waldron could take the hint. At this point, I was watching this game, and I feel like Keenan Allen and this team and the direction that this team goes in is always so disjointed, because I look at a player like Keenan Allen and I enjoy watching him, and I enjoy watching him make a cool play once in a while. But part of me just feels like, what a waste of a player in the NFL. This guy should be on a championship team somewhere. This guy should be on a team making a difference somewhere. And at this point, I watched him, and half the plays he was making were awesome and were like, only Keenan Allen can make that play. And then the other half of the plays were an absolute net negative. This guy is too old. This guy is not a player that you should be partnering with, like a rookie quarterback, to try to develop him. And I ended up with the game like 51-49% wise, where he's a net positive for this team. And this is part of the frustration I have with this team. This guy should have been traded week 7 for like a 3rd round pick, 5th round pick. And where are you guys at with Keenan Allen? Just maybe the direction of this team. I guess it's more of an overarching Ryan, polls question, but I watched that game and I feel like Keenan Allen is a microcosm of where this team is. Where, yes, he's good, but is he better for you than maybe something like Tyler Scott getting reps and maybe missing half of those catches, but at least he's getting reps for the future? Like, where are you guys at with that? Because I watched that game and I was very frustrated with Keenan Allen.
Well, where I'm at with Keenan, I think you summed it up pretty well, the 51-49 net positive, because there are plays that he makes that are great, and how he gets off the line quickly and how he knows how to settle down and into zone coverages. And at times he looks like his old self, but you can see that percentage of his old self is very little in who he is now. He's lost a ton of speed. He just doesn't look like the guy he was with the Chargers. I mean, only a few years ago, 2 years ago, Keenan looked much faster. And, I liked at the time that we targeted a veteran wide receiver like Keenan Allen because he helps out a rookie quarterback in the passing game so much and helps him grow. But I thought the price tag was extremely high. 20 million and a 4th round draft pick for a rental. So you start to look at, okay, it's all about Caleb's development. Now, if Waldron wasn't so bad, if this offensive line wasn't so bad, maybe we've got a winning season and a playoff caliber team, and Keenan Allen's a big part of that. But where we're at now, I do question why we went the Keenan Allen route, why we didn't trade him when there was the trade window. I'm extremely frustrated with the guy, and I wish we had that 4th round draft pick back and that 20 million.
Yeah, it was a very high price to pay. And I think that's part of the issue is they're trying to sit there and they're trying to get their value out of it, right? Like, because we spent so much on you financially and draft capital wise, we need you out there as wide receiver number 2, right? Where the right thing to do would have been to start off the season by leaning on him a little bit, but then make this progression where Rome Odunze takes that spot. Where Rome Odunze is the guy that you drafted number 9, where he's the young one, where once you get him a little bit acclimated with the NFL, couple games, like, you start changing that up and not relying on Keenan Allen so much consistently due to his age, and having him just be there for those clutch moments, for those once in a while throws on 3rd down, where you need to trust a guy. That would be a guy I would trust, right? Because he has had so much experience in this league. But to sit there and just lean on him the way they're doing it and giving him a workload like he's a workhorse at his age, it's just, to me, it's just a way of trying to get your value out of him based off what you paid for him. And once again, I talk about situational football. You're just not using him situationally correct. And so I think it's mismanagement of the roster, in my opinion. And so whether he should have been traded or not, okay, based off how it went, sure, I could entertain that discussion. But in my opinion, the initial move, the idea was there, but then it was just mismanaged and poorly executed throughout those first 7 weeks to get it to a point where we're at now. I don't know, David, what do you think?
Yeah, I pretty much made my points. The only additional things I would say is that the other part of it is that the things that we brought him here for are not what he's doing. He's not reliable on these quick hot reads. He's dropping balls when he should be a short yardage expert, and we're misusing him. And the way that the wide receiver market went in the trade deadline, when DeAndre Hopkins is going for a 2nd round pick, easily Keenan Allen could go for a 3rd. And he could be a useful player for a team like Baltimore or Buffalo or Kansas City or Philadelphia even, right? Who, after their top 2 receivers, are just absolutely depleted. So that's why I don't understand this. This team is always in this mode where they plan for the future and the past simultaneously, right? Or the present and the future. And a guy like Tyler Scott or even DeAndre Carter, to me, I don't think they're going to do as good of a job day to day as Keenan Allen. And maybe you don't want to get rid of that locker room presence, but I don't know. I can't see that it's it's that much of a drop off. If you're getting 75% of Keenan Allen from Tyler Scott and Caleb ends up with 275 yards instead of 330, I'm almost okay with that if Tyler Scott looks like a piece that you want to use next year, as opposed to the 2 snaps that he's taken this entire season.
I was going to say, but the reality is he is not. I'm looking at the stats. I can't find a single stat on Tyler Scott. So, yeah, you're right. I believe there's only 1 or 2 snaps he's been in the entire season. This last game, he was a scratch. He was inactive. So now if you're going to say, oh, well, we wasted a 4th on Keenan Allen, well, in addition, you're also wasting another 4th because of Keenan Allen. So
On
you're
Tyler
actually
Scott,
down
yeah.
2. Yeah, and it's hurting you more than it's helping you for sure.
So this goes into my next question for you guys. And at what point is this season a next year season? And are we there yet? And where are you guys at with that part? Because that kind of leads me into, I personally have already started planning for next season. Keenan Allen, that's my thought process behind that. The Tyler Scott situation and where we're at with Flus and the rest of the team. Are we still playing for this year, or are we looking forward to next year? And are we starting to do things based on next year, or are we still trying to win?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, is Flus in there still trying to win every game? Yes, I believe he is. I think once you get closer to being completely mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, I'm not sure if we're there yet. We actually might be pretty close.
I think we had a 4% chance going into that game, so we might be. Let me try and look that up.
Right. I think then you start to work out other positions, not reinvent the playbook, but you might start doing things to help with Caleb's growth instead of trying to win the game. You want to see him on more peer progression reads. Maybe you start pushing Rome Odunze to, certain plays that he would be the focal point on the play, given the coverage. Start getting some of these long-term guys, younger guys, a little more action. That's a route, but I don't think that Flus would concede that. I think regardless of the outcome at the end of the season, I think he wants to win as many games as possible.
And so I found it. So we have a 0.7% chance.
There's a chance.
You're telling me there's a chance. And you know what? This is actually Matt Eberflus's comfort zone. If there's ever a 99.3% chance that something will happen and the other thing happens, that screams Matt Eberflus to me. So I'm sure he's like, yeah, this is exactly where I want to be.
I'm gonna pull this one off, boys.
Yeah.
I've had 0.5 staring me at the face before, and I came out on top.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I made that happen. So yeah, and unfortunately,
Paulie, do you care to comment on the future proofing of this
Yes.
season versus
Sure. David, I'm a lot harsher with that than I think most people are, because I just tend to, like you said, when I came back from vacation, it was week 5. You kind of made fun of me because I was like, yeah, dude, it's not happening, man. Like I've been away from this team week to week. I've been in Europe for 2 weeks, but just looking at it from like afar, it's just like, oh no, dude, this is like what it takes to actually make the dance and then do the dance and win a damn Super Bowl in this league. No, this team's got no chance. And so I felt that way heading into week 1 because Matt Eberflus was still our coach. However, after a 4-2 start, I backed off a little bit from it. I gained some hope and I said, okay, maybe, just maybe. Then after those 2-3 collapse games, that just underlined it for me. I was looking at the future already. I don't know, right after heading into the Patriots game, maybe even heading into that game, I was just like, yeah, whatever. I don't care if we look great against the worst team in the league. Like, it's going to mean nothing to me. And so, I would have loved to beat Green Bay because that still means something to me. for now, for this moment right now. However, as far as the season goes, no, we would need to get extraordinarily lucky. I mean, 0.7% chance just to make it, right? And so there's nothing to lean on here.
I don't mean it in the sense of actually competing for the playoffs and actually being like a serious contender this year. I guess my rhetorical question is, do the Bears, do Ryan Poles, do the McCaskies, does anybody with, how many games do we have left? 7 games in the season?
Yeah, well, this was week 12. So
with 7 games in the season, is anybody actually future planning right now, or are they waiting for the end of the season? So that kind of like, and that is my fundamental issue with this team since I've been in high school, right? I don't know.
Crimson's right. It is 6. It is 6. There's
6 games left. Thank you, Crimson. It's a team that can't plan for the future really, really well, I feel like, and it's part of the problem as a franchise. And this is where my ownership argument comes back into play. Sorry, Paulie, but like it's a team where, in my mind, and here's my controversial hot take opinion of the week. I'm going to give it an 80%, if not higher, chance that when Matt Eberflus gets absolutely dominated by the Detroit Lions this week, will be the first mid-season coach firing in Chicago Bears history. We are talking about another situation where if you want to start auditioning head coaches for the NFL, and Thomas Brown has been, interviewed for head coaching positions. He has been interviewed for the offensive coordinator spot in Chicago and somehow was beaten by Shane Waldron. I can't imagine being in the room with those two guys separately and then interviewing them and then walking out of those 2 interviews and saying, like, that's my guy, and it's Shane Waldron, and then saying Thomas Brown is the guy who I'm iffy about. It's absolutely insane. That all being said, if you are in any way a cheap McCaskey, which the McCaskies are, and you're just thinking about Thomas Brown next year, or you're not going to pay the bank for Kyle Shanahan or Ben Johnson or whatever it is, and I'm putting my prediction in this based on, I'm McCaskey proofing my prediction, because in a logical world, a good NFL team would throw a blank check at Kyle Shanahan, would throw a blank check at Ben Johnson and say, please come over here. But I'm McCaskey proofing this prediction. I think they're going to give Thomas Brown a 6 to 5 game audition and then hire him as head coach next year. That's my kind of like future proofing of this team.
And that's the bad way to go, because you're going to get stuck in like an Antonio Pierce situation like the Raiders had, where like, okay, sure, you come in and you make it look better than the guys before you that were terrible. And like I said, I think some of Thomas Brown's success, it comes from the failures of Shane Waldron. I mean, because we're looking at how much better he is than what the guy who was here before did. And that's not the way to go, though, because who's Thomas Brown bringing in as his staff? Right? Like, so we're talking about
pretty well connected.
He is, but what I'm saying, though, J2K, is like, even when it comes to Ben Johnson, who's very well connected, I'm still a little iffy on that, because where I think this team is from a talent-wise perspective, from how young the quarterback is and everything like that, is in a place where we just need some real experienced head coaches in here. Like I said, that's why I was making a push for Jim Harbaugh last offseason. I don't care if you like him, don't like him. I personally don't have much of an opinion on him that way. But what I do know is he's been in this league. He's got a good staff underneath him. He's a real good coach. He knows how to win. He's proven he knows how to win. I mean, if Kyle Shanahan is available, that is number 1 target, period, right? Like, if he's available. If not, I would still, feel better about, getting another guy in here that's actually had some experience as a head coach. If Kevin Stefanski becomes available, sure, give me Kevin Stefanski. He's been coach of the year 2 times. He was really hamstrung by his ownership and the way that thing went. But at one point, he had the Browns kind of fixed in a very tough
I would
division.
take Mike Vrabel with Thomas Brown staying as offensive coordinator.
And that I wouldn't prefer that. However, that would still be an upgrade over what we have right now. Right. So I do think you need to bring a guy in here that's going to flip this thing around from a staff perspective. And I'm not just so convinced that an unproven guy has all the tools necessary to be able to do that. It would still be, my whole overall just quote of this season is I'm done with hope. And I keep saying it. I'm done hoping. I want to dominate by design like these good teams do. I don't want to hope that the next guy we bring in here becomes a good coach. I don't want to hope for anything anymore. Let's get the guy that's a good coach. You know what I mean? Let's just go out there and do it and have more structure and have more confidence, even if the ceiling for the potential of the coach isn't that high. I would just so much rather have a good floor from a head coach right now, in my opinion.
Before J2K, and J2K, I want you to have the next 5 minutes all on your own
and
respond to all this. There are things that I think the Bears should do, that I think the Bears want to do, and that I think the Bears will do.
Right.
And so, so this is where I'm giving you my predictions, right? Like Shanahan, Ben Johnson, blank checks, eat it. You're an $8 billion franchise. Ben Johnson, Kyle Shanahan, blank check priority. John Lynch is included in that. You fire Ryan Poles, you bring him in, you fuck off into the sunset, George McCaskey. That is the one option. The likelihood of that happening is about 5%. Maybe less. The level 2 option is the Kevin Stefanski, Mike Vrabel, like Paulie wants. And what I want is actual NFL head coaches that have had success and could probably elevate your team to a higher level while simultaneously kind of bringing some respect to that locker room. Then there's the McCaskey way. Then there's the we already got this guy in the building and we really respect guys that are already here and we give them multiple chances. And it's going to turn into a Thomas Brown interim head coach into a full head coach, and it's a 2-year waste of time. Lovey's a waste of time. I'm sorry. All of these guys are a waste of time. It's all just mid-level shit. And while this is what I'm saying is there's tiers to this, and I'm giving you guys the McCaskey realistic tier, which is the Thomas Brown 6-game tryout. See what he's got because they might hire him anyway. Guys, this is the horrific truth, is that they might just keep Eberflus till the end of the season, fire him on Black Monday, interview Thomas Brown, and then just give him the job anyway. If that's the fucking case, give him a 5-game audition. For the love of God, give it to him. And go for it, J2K. Break it down.
Well, no, before you go for it, one thing's been kind of consistent here about this whole thing, that this team holds on to failures. David, you said it for 30% too long. Velus Jones should have been cut. What's his name? Chase Claypool should have been gone. Nate Davis should have been gone. Matt Eberflus should have been gone too. Go ahead, J2K.
Well, I agree with a lot of your points, Dave. Giving Thomas Brown a chance to be the interim head coach is something I would like to see. Now, to talk about some of these coaches and their background. So first, Thomas Brown, he's got a ton of connections. If there's a guy who is next in line to be a head coach, it is Thomas Brown in the NFL. And I say that including guys like Ben Johnson, some of the other, Liam Cohen, maybe Zach Robinson, some of these offensive coordinators who've just gotten promoted and are looking really good. Thomas Brown has tons of connections. The whole staff with Carolina was all Frank Reich. You got Josh McCown, who is on that staff, who is also offensive coordinator, pseudo offensive coordinator in Minnesota. You've got the whole Sean McVay staff. Thomas Brown's, also comes from that lineage of Shanahan. So there are so many people, head coaches, that would not block somebody getting promoted from their staff to go and work for Thomas Brown. I truly wholeheartedly believe that. I think Thomas Brown, he was someone that I was talking about when, we fired Luke Getsy, and I'm like, there's this guy, Thomas Brown, we got to check him out. Everything I'm hearing about this guy is great. He's got a ton of connections. Ben Johnson is a mastermind, and I have zero problems with him being our head coach. My concern, though, is that he really didn't come from anywhere. So he doesn't have a whole bunch of connections. He's basically got Detroit coaching connections, and that's what he's going to bring with him. So let me throw out a name here that isn't talked about too much. Todd Monken of Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator. He's got Lamar Jackson, MVP, 2 years, right? Potentially a third year. He's always talked up in like the MVP top, 3 category. He comes from not only Baltimore, but he also comes from Georgia. And Mike McDaniel, who became the head coach over at Seattle, also came through this coaching pipeline. So not only do you get, an offensive coordinator that has turned Lamar Jackson into a superstar, you also get that pipeline from Baltimore, who always pump out good coaches. You also get that pipeline from Georgia, who also pump out good coaches. So he's a name I really like. Another name, Buffalo's offensive coordinator, Joe Bradley, is a guy who I also really like, just because he's been doing it for so long, and you've seen how many pieces to that Buffalo offense that has been, taken away and changed out, and they're still explosive on offense. So I love that. Now, some of these other coaches, I heard John Gruden's name pop up.
I mean, we're combining a lot of thoughts here, but I think it just turns into you get Joe Brady, you have no idea what he is as a game manager. You have no idea what he is as a coordinator. Like, what he can do as a coordinator, but that's why part of my thought process is give Thomas Brown and the whole argument of him being a booth coach, which is very relevant. If this guy wants to be a head coach in the NFL, he can't call it from the booth. He's got to be down there. He's got to be in the game, in the situation. Like, I'm okay with even Eric Washington being a interim head coach while Thomas Brown is still the offensive coordinator. And if Thomas Brown doesn't want to be a head coach and he wants to call plays from the booth, then you know what? The guy from Tampa Bay, Liam Cohen, right? Make him your head coach and make Thomas Brown. They're like this in terms of scheme and schematics and what they do and what the trees that they came from. And I'm with you, J2K. Like, you can combine these things and mix and match, but the whole point of this conversation 20 minutes ago where it started is start future proofing your team, because right now it's all Caleb. Guys, it's all Caleb. The only thing that matters is Caleb. Can we agree? Like, you can build a team. This team is so talented. I thought I had a question on my notes and thought experiment. If you plug Jim Harbaugh in to any of these games and we review these games, how many of them do you win versus lose? Right? We're talking about a team that competes in the NFC North with 7 or 8 wins versus
also a
being a
different philosophy. He would have gone out and gotten us offensive linemen. And that's the issue I have right now. Is I know a lot of this blame falls onto Eberflus. My issue is that I think while we have a lot of talent, we're unbalanced. Our offensive line did not have the depth it needed, had a bunch of question marks going into the season. We spent a 3rd round draft pick on a kid I really like, but a kid who is injured, played at a small school, very raw technically. It's going to take him time. So that's not a current solution. It's a future solution. So I have a lot of issues with how Poles built this team. And I think Jim Harbaugh would have walked in here and said, oh, no, we're not taking Roman Dunze. we're going to take J.C. Latham out of Alabama, and he's going to be our left tackle, or he's going to compete for the left tackle job. You know, maybe we move Braxton to swing tackle. We're going to go out and get a real center. You know, we're going to get somebody who can back up Tevin Jenkins if he goes down. And, oh, by the way, I've noticed this Nate Davis guy doesn't like practicing. Well, he's going to practice, and I'm going to find someone to, you know, put a fire underneath his butt behind him, you know. And that's my biggest criticism of the roster build of Poles to date.
Yeah, and you know, just to speak on that, that's why that whole building from the outside in is a little bit backwards, and teams build from the inside out, because you know, I said it during the offseason. What's the quickest way to implode an offense? Bad offensive line. I mean, that could destroy you in so many categories, even if you're able to overcome it and come away with big plays in the clutch. Guess what? Yellow flag, holding. Try that again. 10 yards back. Like, it's just so deflating when your offensive line sucks. Plus, it's getting your quarterback killed at the end of the day. So that's cute that you got the quarterback at 1-1. But if you can't keep him upright, I mean, I know heading into the Minnesota Vikings game, he was the most sacked quarterback in the league. You don't learn anything from having your head bashed into the ground over and over. I know Peyton Manning has a rookie interception record, 28 interceptions. You could learn from that. And he did. He took time to sit there and review his mistakes and learn from it. You're not learning anything from just getting hit over and over and over. If anything, that makes you see ghosts, that develops bad habits, and those things tend to linger throughout careers for quarterbacks, especially when they happen at a very young time in their career in the NFL. And yeah, and so, you know, we were going off about this, and it was one of the extremely unpopular takes I had during the offseason, where, like I said, even if Marvin Harrison Jr. drops to 9, I'm happy because I'm getting a bigger haul for trading back, because I need a defensive end still. I need a center still. Like, you could sit there and tell me, oh, you want to take the best player available, and I get that draft philosophy, and it's worked for some teams. However, when you have obvious holes still on this roster, you need to get that stuff straightened out. That's a lot more important than trying to take, you know, a guy that winds up playing wide receiver 3 for you all year. Right.
You spent a top 10 draft pick, $20 million, and a 4th-round draft pick on 2 wide receivers and 0 offensive line help out of those assets. Keenan Allen could have been a starting offensive lineman and a backup rookie 4th-round offensive lineman right there.
100%. So, like, I was on one show that asked the question of, did Ryan Poles neglect the offensive line? Now, I wouldn't use such a harsh word as neglect, because when you look at his 3 years here, as far as drafting goes, you did spend a 1st-round pick on Darnell Wright, and you did spend a 3rd-round pick this year on Amagaji. But after that, it's all 6th and 7th-round picks, right? Now, Amagaji's hurt, so, like, really, I mean, you didn't neglect it, but you didn't really address it. You sat there, you tried to band-aid the center position through free agency over and over and over, and you didn't really show this thing the attention that it needed. Like, the offensive line here was clearly bad. And yeah, you know, to go out and sign Nate Davis and think that he's going to sit there and solve problems for you, that imploded in their face. And, you know, when you said Jim Harbaugh would have wanted, you know, had Nate Davis practice, man, Mike Vrabel, when they got rid of Nate Davis, Mike Vrabel came out and said, yeah, we got rid of him because I want a guy who will practice. Like, there was your scouting report on him, man.
Well, I'm in the minority, but I actually like the Nate Davis signing at first because of his play on the field. Now, he doesn't look like that player he was in Tennessee. Clearly, something's up with him. You know, I'm starting to get the sense that once his mom passed, and I think there's some other personal issues he was going through, that this last contract was him saying, I think I'm done with the NFL. I'm just going to show up as much as I can to get a paycheck. And, you know, the likelihood of him going to another team with this type of attitude and regression in his play and making any money, it's just not there. So I think he made a business decision to walk out of it. He was a very good offensive lineman at Tennessee.
I agree with that.
I guess I would have one more comment, and Crimson participating a lot in the chat. We just haven't put a lot of it up. And I said Caleb was the future, and that's really all that matters. I don't mean that literally, right? Crimson, in the sense that no one else matters. It's a 53-man roster. It's 11 starters on offense, 11 starters on defense. But when you go into last year, right, with getting rid of Fields and taking a risk on Caleb, that to me felt a lot more risky than it does this year. And I guess my closing question to you two is, do you feel better, or do you feel that it's a little bit more easy to get the coaching decision right rather than when you need to find a quarterback? Because I feel like we found the quarterback. I think the quarterback situation has been settled. I feel much more comfortable going into this offseason, hoping that I feel a little bit more. If we get the wrong coach, I'll know it right away. I'll see it. I'll know it. I will doubt it. If we get the wrong guy, I'll know. If we get the right guy, I'll probably know. Whereas when we got Caleb, I had hopes, I had dreams, but I had no idea. And where are we at moving into next season? And how do you guys feel about it? Because I think that we're in a, as fucked up as it is with this, how much of a wasted lame duck year this is, I guess the silver lining is that next year, if you go into it with the right coaching staff, you can get me back in to being hyped up for this team.
So I'll start. For me, it's actually the coaching staff is very, very important, obviously. But I gotta see the assets we have this offense spent on the offensive line and defensive line. Offensive line, obviously, a priority. Defensive line, the next priority. And I'm talking about like as a group. Like I would like to see, a starting center, a high second, 2 second rounds. If we have 2/3 or at least 1/3, all those being spent on offensive linemen, maybe a defensive end, a defensive tackle, first round draft pick spent on the best player at, either trench, right? So that's what will give me optimism. I think the coaching is still going to be a huge question mark, just because I don't see what a lot of fans are asking for. Well, they're asking for, we want someone who's got experience, who's going to be a good head coach. Well, a head coach that's had experience is also a head coach that's been fired. Dan Quinn was fired in Atlanta, right? We could all hope that Shanahan gets fired, but I don't see that happening. There's 10 teams in the league that hope that Shanahan gets fired. We actually have a lot of good coaching on our staff, good coaches on our staff. I mean, a lot of people target Chris Morgan, our offensive line coach, and say he's a bad coach. And then you go and look at like who he's been with. Had Eberflus not kept Chris Morgan, Morgan would have been in Washington with Dan Quinn because they coached together in Atlanta. And they, given Washington's success, all their fans would be like, oh, we got this great offensive line coach. You go back to Washington of 2011 and 2013. You look at that coaching staff with Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, Chris Morgan's on that team.
The guy from
Hightowers on that team. Sean McVay, Slowick. I mean, you're just reading off like really talented coaches, and there's Chris Morgan sitting there amongst all of these really quality coaching groups and trees and stuff. So, like, I don't think he's a bad coach. I think people talk about Hightower and Washington as good coaches around the league. These are quality guys. Our secondary coach, John Hoke, he's a quality coach. So I don't think that we just have bad coaching. I think that's kind of a simple way of attacking the team when you don't know all the nuances and how much things are intertwined. But I think that where it starts, like at the top with Eberflus, he just doesn't have the guys around him like the Thomas Browns who can fire up the team, and he can just sit back and be just the head coach. Had he had, Eric Washington as defensive coordinator, Thomas Brown as offensive coordinator, and he can sit back and be the head coach, and for a couple of years, then I think that staff, same names, different results.
Yeah, it kind of, I mean, as a coach, you're not playing the game, right? So the results come from the players on the field. It comes from the execution on the field. But I think what I'm seeing is like, we talk about the NFL and we talk about how, 2-3 plays a game can make the difference in a game, right? So like the variable for failure to success, like that it's small, man. It's very small. Like there's a lot of good coaches in the NFL. Hell, most of them are good coaches because they're in the NFL, right? And so it comes down to the fine details. And when you look at the fine details, where one Hail Mary, a blocked kick, hell, I'll even say another blocked kick in this game away from, 3 victories, really. Like, and then if those 3 plays go differently, hell, if those even 2 plays go differently, right? Like the block kick against the Packers and the Hail Mary against Washington, and those are wins instead of losses, then these conversations don't even exist.
Yeah,
right?
Like, so if we're 7-4, we've watched the same exact plays, just minus 3 plays going our way instead of against us, right? I mean, everybody's excited, and they're all, we're all saying Flus is great. And
no,
are you kidding me? If we're
the difference is
$7-4,
J2K, the chat would be disagreeing with us. Because I think me and David would still be on the same thing, because we're seeing what we're seeing, and we're trying to take the overall result and the overall eye test of the consistency of it all. And that tells a different story, right? Like we understand those 1-2 plays that go bad that make a difference. And that's really the masses would be so excited. I think me and David would still kind of be on this whole, this is kind of just like a curtain, like inflated, because overall the thing consistently doesn't go well.
I think a lot of what Paulie has changed my mind on is what your standard is are we competing with the Packers for last place in the NFC North, or are we competing with the Lions and the Eagles for the NFC Championship? And that's where Paulie has changed my mind, where you have a quarterback that can, I'm sorry, Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts, I'll take Caleb Williams. Now it's what you put around him. Can you put a defense and a team and a coaching staff around Caleb Williams? Because right now, if you put a coaching staff and a team as good as the Eagles have and as good as the Lions have around Caleb Williams, I would take Caleb Williams over Jared Goff and Jalen Hurts 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10 right now. That guy's a fucking stud. And we have a 2 to 3 year window to do that for this guy, because you can compete in this. This is not a team where, and I think this is part of it where, people, we're going to take a step back, reshuffling coaching staffs. Thomas Brown in 2 games shows you that that's not true. Because in 2 games, Thomas Brown has been much more effective than Shane Waldron has with an entire offseason. So you give me Kyle Shanahan, you give me Ben Johnson, you give me any coach that can actually coach this team up to be a complementary football team and like a staff that can back each other up, then I don't think you're taking a step back next year. I don't think you need to take a step back to take a step forward with coaching in modern NFL times. I think the right coaching staff will elevate you instantly. The same way we just talked about with this team is all you need to do is replace Matt Eberflus with Jim Harbaugh. And I think we're talking about the situation you guys are talking about. It's a 7-win team. It's a team that's competing for an NFC title game, where it's competing for a playoff berth. Because the only difference right now in terms of this team is coaching and how it's being mismanaged.